The Jinn of Los Angeles. Holmby's Bakaku. Genie in a Bottle Chapter 1. Discovery in the garden. The soft golden rays of the Los Angeles sun bathed the sprawling Holmby Hills mansion in a warm, inviting glow. The pristine exterior, bathed in tones of beige and cream, seemed to sparkle under the celestial touch. Birds sang, their melodies creating an almost surreal ambiance. It was a day like any other, but for Darla, it was about to change everything. She stood on the third-floor balcony overlooking the gardens, a porcelain cup of tea in hand. The sprawling gardens, each section themed differently, were her pride and joy. From the rose maze to the serene lotus pond, everything was curated to perfection. Today, her eyes were drawn to the jasmine and lavender garden, a fragrant paradise she often retreated to when in need of solace. Something glittered there, a glint, out of place amidst the sea of green and shades of purple. Squinting, she tried to discern the object, but to no avail. "James," she called, and within moments, her trusted house concierge appeared. "There's something in the jasmine garden. Can you see what it is?" James followed her gaze. "I'll investigate right away, Miss Darla." Watching him go, she took a sip of her tea, its floral notes mirroring the surrounding gardens. The wind picked up slightly, rustling leaves and carrying an unfamiliar cold undertone. She shivered involuntarily. It took a good 10 minutes before James reappeared, holding a cloth that hid whatever it was he'd found. As he neared, she saw his face, usually calm and unflappable, pale with a trace of unease. "What is it, James?" "Miss Darla," he began, carefully choosing his words. "It appears to be a vial of sorts." Oddly enough, it was buried. Handing her the object wrapped in the cloth, he added, "I thought it best to keep it covered. It has an otherworldly feel to it." Intrigued, Darla unwrapped the vial. A dark blue, almost midnight in hue, and peculiarly cold to the touch. The vial was sealed, and though it was opaque, it was clear that something rested inside. Lost in her thoughts, she started polishing the vial with the cloth, hoping to get a clearer view of its contents. The wind gusted again, stronger this time, bringing with it a scent that wasn't part of her gardens, something ancient and musty. As she continued to rub the vial, a smoky mist began to seep out. The world seemed to blur, and a coldness enveloped her. The vial fell from her hands, and the mist grew, swirling and expanding rapidly. Then, with a deafening roar, the mist solidified into a towering figure, eyes glowing like coals. Bakaku had been released. "Free!" The Jinn boomed, his voice echoing. His eyes surveyed his surroundings and settled on Darla, who, paralyzed with fear, could only watch. The sheer force of his presence knocked the wind out of her, and she stumbled back. Bakaku stretched his form, passing through walls, doors, and ceilings. The mansion trembled, and Darla could hear objects crashing and shattering. After what felt like hours, he returned, having mapped his new territory. Holmby Hills was now his prison. Still recovering from the initial shock, Darla found her voice. "Who?" "What are you?" Bakaku's laughter, rich and dark, filled the air. "I am Bakaku, the Jinn, created by the mystic Ibn Arabi over 1,500 years ago. This is but the second time I've tasted freedom." Seeing the confusion and fear on Darla's face, he smirked. "For releasing me, you have been granted 5 wishes. But, as with all things of power, there's a price for each. A price you won't get to choose." Fear and wonder battled within Darla. 5 wishes. The potential was limitless, but the costs. What could be so precious that a Jinn of this magnitude would demand it? The world around her seemed sharper, the colors more vivid. The mansion, once her sanctuary, now felt different, invaded. Every creak of the wooden floors, every gust of wind carried with it a sense of foreboding. And as the sun began to dip, casting long, haunting shadows across the lavish estate, Darla knew that her life would never be the same again. She had unearthed a horror that was as ancient as time, and it demanded a price she wasn't sure she was willing to pay. Chapter 2. The first wish. The sun had set, casting Holmby Hills into an uneasy dusk. The mansion's interior lights glowed dimly, eerily reminiscent of candles in ancient temples. The usual buzz of Los Angeles seemed muted, as though the city itself held its breath in anticipation. Darla, her chest heaving, tried to compose herself. She stared at Bakaku, whose form was constantly shifting, a wisp of smoke one moment, a solid, towering figure the next. "What is this price you speak of?" Her voice was shaky but laced with a defiant undertone. Bakaku grinned, his teeth gleaming ominously. "Each wish you make has consequences, a balance that must be maintained. When you wish, you'll gain something of your desire, but you'll lose something in return. Something personal, something dear." Darla bit her lip, contemplating. The weight of her choices lay heavy on her heart. Yet the allure of such power was undeniable. "I wish," she began hesitantly, "for immeasurable wealth." The room seemed to pulse. Gold coins appeared, pouring from the ceiling, spilling onto the floors. Precious gems, rubies, emeralds, diamonds, materialized out of thin air, their facets reflecting the dim light. The once modest mansion transformed, its furnishings becoming opulent, its walls adorned with rare paintings. The world spun, and Darla felt a sharp pain in her right eye. She collapsed, grasping her face. When she finally dared to look, her vision was halved. Her right eye had turned milky white, sightless. "The price for your wealth," Bakaku murmured, his voice dripping with malevolent delight, "is your right eye's sight." Horror flooded Darla. Half blind, she realized the gravity of the situation she'd thrust herself into. But her ordeal was just beginning. Determined not to show weakness, she steadied herself. "Fine," she snapped, trying to mask her fear. "You've taken my sight. Now, I wish for fame, unrivaled, worldwide recognition." In an instant, her phone, which lay on a nearby table, began buzzing relentlessly. Social media notifications, news alerts, emails, they all bore her name. News channels reported on her sudden rise to prominence, her face plastered everywhere. People outside her mansion screamed her name, their adoration palpable. Yet, as the cacophony grew, Darla felt something slip from her mind, her memories. Her childhood, her first love, her parents, all fading into oblivion. Panicking, she grasped at them, but they slipped through like sand. "You are now known to all, but you've forgotten your past," Bakaku intoned. "Fame has its price." Tears streamed down Darla's face, the enormity of her losses weighing her down. "Enough," she cried. "No more wishes. Release me from this curse." Bakaku's laughter, a chilling, echoing sound, filled the mansion. "Oh, but you have 3 more wishes to make. And until you do, I remain, a shadow in your life." In her despair, Darla wished she'd never uncovered that accursed vial. The mansion, though grander and filled with unimaginable wealth, felt cold, a prison of her own making. That night, Darla barely slept, her dreams invaded by memories she could no longer recall and a looming dread that clung to her. Bakaku's presence was always felt, an oppressive weight that never let her forget her predicament. Days turned into weeks. Darla's once luxurious life became a living nightmare. Her fame made her a target, with the media scrutinizing her every move, and her wealth brought out opportunists. Yet, it was the looming presence of Bakaku and the impending wishes that kept her constantly on edge. One evening, as thunder rumbled and rain lashed against the mansion's windows, Darla, desperate for escape, made her third wish. "I wish to travel anywhere, instantly." Bakaku smirked. "As you wish." Suddenly, Darla was no longer in her mansion. She stood atop a snow-capped mountain, the cold biting into her skin. Moments later, she was in a bustling marketplace in some unknown country, the scents and sounds overwhelming. Then, she was underwater, surrounded by vibrant coral and curious fish. The world shifted rapidly, each location more disorienting than the last. When she finally returned to her mansion, breathless and disheveled, Bakaku was waiting. "You can now travel anywhere. But each time you do, you'll leave behind a piece of yourself." Confused, Darla looked down. Her reflection in the polished marble floor showed her, but she appeared, faded, less solid, as though she were slowly becoming a ghost. The reality hit her. Every time she traveled, she'd lose more of her physical presence. Despair gripped her, but she knew she had to find a way out. 2 more wishes, 2 more prices to pay, and perhaps, just perhaps, she'd be free of this torment. As the storm outside intensified, mirroring the tempest in her soul, Darla braced herself for the trials that lay ahead. And in the heart of Holmby Hills, a battle of wits between a desperate woman and an ancient Jinn had only just begun. Chapter 3. Ageless desires. Days melded into nights, and the once buzzing mansion in Holmby Hills became a haunting echo of its former glory. With the windows drawn shut, darkness pervaded the sprawling rooms, with only the occasional flicker of candlelight breaking the monotony. Darla, a shadow of her former self, wandered the corridors aimlessly, haunted by her losses. Her right eye, now milky white, was a chilling testament to her first wish. The erased memories of her life left her unmoored, a specter in her own home. And the faint translucence of her body served as a cruel reminder of the price of travel. One evening, after hours of avoiding Bakaku's hovering presence, she found herself in her vast, now dusty library. The room was filled with books of all kinds, from rare first editions to ancient manuscripts. On a hunch, she began to search for anything that might contain information on jinns. Hours turned into days as she immersed herself in ancient lore, hoping to find a way out of her predicament. Among the vast tomes, she stumbled upon a book titled Of Spirits and Men, Binding and Releasing the Ethereal. It spoke of ancient rituals, of words that had the power to control, and even banish, spirits. Emboldened by hope, Darla began to formulate a plan. If she could somehow use her remaining wishes to her advantage, and combine them with the rituals she'd discovered, she might have a shot at getting rid of Bakaku forever. But first, she had to face the reality of her next wish. Staring at her reflection, noticing the fine lines of age and stress, a thought crossed her mind. "I wish," she whispered hesitantly, "to be young again, to have the beauty and vitality of my 20s. Almost instantly, her skin became radiant, the lines vanished, and her figure slimmed and toned. She looked like she had stepped out of a past she no longer remembered. A surge of vitality rushed through her, making her feel alive, perhaps for the first time since Bakaku's arrival. The elation, however, was short-lived. Bakaku, appearing out of the shadows, his voice dripping with malice, said, "A return to youth requires a balancing of the scales." Suddenly, a piercing pain enveloped Darla's heart. Images flashed before her eyes, faces of people she loved and cared for. As the pain intensified, she watched, horrified, as the faces aged rapidly, their youth and vitality draining away, transferring from them to her. Friends, family, even mere acquaintances, all seemed to age decades in mere moments. When the pain subsided, Darla, rejuvenated but devastated, realized the horrific cost of her wish. Everyone she ever knew now bore the weight of the years she'd cast off. The isolation she felt grew, knowing she couldn't face those she'd unintentionally harmed. Embracing her newfound youth and energy, she delved deeper into the rituals. The book detailed a ceremony that could bind a spirit, but it required components that were challenging to acquire. A moonstone bathed in the light of a lunar eclipse, the feather of a raven born from an alabaster egg, and a vial of tears shed from genuine heartbreak. Time was of the essence, especially with 2 wishes still looming over her. She decided to make her 4th wish. "I wish for the moonstone, the raven's feather, and the vial of tears," she said with newfound determination. A glint of intrigue flashed in Bakaku's eyes. "Very well," he said, his voice an eerie calm. In the blink of an eye, the 3 items appeared before her. But as Darla reached out to touch them, her hand passed right through, as though they were mere illusions. "Your wish is granted," Bakaku sneered. "You have the items, but they're out of reach, existing in a reality separate from yours." Desperation clawed at Darla. To be so close to her salvation and yet so far was torment. But she refused to let Bakaku see her despair. She had 1 wish left, and she'd need all her wit and cunning to make it count. As the days passed, Bakaku's malevolence grew, the mansion bearing the brunt of his wrath. Rooms froze or caught fire. Shadows danced and whispered. But amidst the chaos, Darla's resolve hardened. With every ounce of courage she could muster, she approached Bakaku for her final wish, setting into motion a plan that could either free her from her curse or bind her to it eternally. Chapter 4. The Devil's Deal. Holmby Hills, once bustling with the wealthy elite, had grown eerily silent. Tales of Darla's cursed mansion spread like wildfire. Whispers of phantoms, of fires that burned without fuel, and a beauty who walked its hallways, never aging, always in despair, became the stuff of legend. Yet, amidst the sprawling grounds of the cursed mansion, inside its darkened rooms, Darla was more alive than she had ever been, plotting her final confrontation with Bakaku. She spent sleepless nights rehearsing her final wish, each word carefully weighed and chosen. Bakaku, on the other hand, seemed almost giddy with anticipation. He'd interrupt her plans with sudden gusts of cold wind or whispers just behind her ear, his laughter echoing through the empty corridors. Yet, in his arrogance, he missed the quiet strength growing within Darla, the resolute glint in her eye. One evening, as a storm raged outside, lightning illuminating the mansion's grandeur in stark relief, Darla summoned Bakaku. The room they stood in once housed parties of the city's elite, but now its broken chandeliers and dust-covered furniture stood testament to its decline. "You seem prepared," Bakaku remarked, swirling around her like mist, "ready to make your final wish?" Darla took a deep breath, grounding herself. "Yes, but first, a question." He hovered before her, materializing into a semi-solid form, eyes ablaze with interest. "Ask. Why were you trapped in the vial? Who was your last master?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Bakaku's face, but it was quickly replaced with a smirk. "My last master was a fool, much like you. He thought he could control me, use me for his whims. But like all before him, he failed to understand the true nature of our deal." Darla nodded, absorbing his words, and with newfound determination said, "I wish that my final wish is one that satisfies both our desires, one where neither of us feels cheated or betrayed." The room grew colder. The audacity of such a wish took Bakaku aback. He studied Darla, trying to find a hint of deception. "And what, pray tell, would that wish be?" Darla approached Bakaku, her every step radiating confidence. "I wish for you to be free, Bakaku, but with a choice. You can choose to be a free spirit, wandering the world without bounds, or you can choose to be mortal, to live a human life with all its joys and pains. Bakaku stared at her, disbelief evident on his face. Why would you wish this for me? Darla's voice was soft but firm, because, even after everything, I believe that every being deserves a chance at redemption, at happiness. If being free makes you happy, then so be it. If experiencing humanity is what you desire, you have that choice too. For a long moment, the room was silent, save for the rain pattering against the windows. Then, with a scream that seemed to shake the very foundations of the mansion, Bakaku began to transform. His smoky form solidified, becoming more human-like, but the process seemed agonizing. Darla could only watch as the Jinn writhed, torn between two worlds. When the transformation was complete, before her stood a man, seemingly in his 30s, with raven black hair and eyes that still held the ancientness of the Jinn. Bakaku, or the man he had become, looked at his hands, his body, with wonder. What have you done? Darla replied, I've given you a gift, Bakaku, the gift of choice. He looked up, eyes filled with a mixture of anger and confusion. Why? Because, Darla said, maybe, in your human life, you'll find the peace and purpose you never had as a Jinn. And if not, at least you have the freedom to seek it out. The new man, who was once the ancient Jinn, seemed lost, grappling with emotions he had never before experienced. After a few moments, he whispered, "Thank you," and without another word, walked out of the mansion, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. The curse on the mansion seemed to lift almost immediately. The fires ceased, the cold winds abated, and warmth returned. But for Darla, the journey was far from over. She had regained her senses and memories, but the weight of her wishes, the consequences they brought about, would stay with her forever. The mansion in Holmby Hills no longer stood as a haunted house but as a testament to a woman's indomitable spirit and the possibility of redemption. And while Darla would move on, finding solace in helping others and seeking her own redemption, the legend of the mansion, of the beauty and the Jinn, would forever remain a part of Holmby Hills folklore. Chapter 5. Echoes of darkness. The quiet of Holmby Hills was deceptive. Beneath the tranquil facade of manicured lawns and opulent mansions, murmurs spread like ripples in a pond. Darla's residence, the focal point of whispered conversations, stood tall and restored. But while the exterior hinted at rebirth, its insides bore the memories of a past that refused to fade. Darla had hoped that with Bakaku's departure, her life would regain its lost semblance of normalcy. And for a time, it seemed so. The air grew lighter, the flowers more vibrant. Even the staff, those few that dared return, moved with a cautious optimism. But as the days turned to weeks, a shadow began to grow. At first, it was subtle, a misplaced item, a fleeting shadow in the periphery, a whisper where none should be. But slowly, the disturbances grew more pronounced. Doors slammed shut, cold drafts snaked through sealed windows, and at night, the soft, melancholic strumming of a piano would echo through the mansion's vast halls. Darla tried to dismiss these occurrences. Perhaps it was just the mansion settling, or the wind playing tricks. But when she started to see apparitions, figures draped in white, faces obscured, moving silently, it became clear that a new malevolence had taken root. One evening, as she was retiring to her room, a sharp knock echoed through her quarters. She approached the door, heart pounding, and found a small, ornate box on her doorstep. Carved from dark wood and adorned with strange symbols, the box radiated an ancient energy. Tentatively, she opened the box. Inside was a letter, written in a script that seemed to shimmer and change with every blink. It read, "Dear Darla, You may have freed Bakaku, but in doing so, you've awakened something far older, far more dangerous. The balance has shifted, and you now bear the weight of the consequences. Seek out the Oracle of Crescent Moon. She is your only hope. Be wary, for the shadows are watching. Yours in warning, a friend. Darla sat back, her mind racing. Who sent this? What did it mean? And who was the Oracle of Crescent Moon? Determined to find answers, she set out the next day. With only the name to guide her, her search took her to the fringes of Los Angeles, to a street market that seemed to exist out of time. Here, amidst stalls selling curios and antiques, she found a small tent bearing the sign, Oracle of Crescent Moon. Inside the dimly lit tent, an old woman sat, her eyes covered by a cloth band. The air was thick with the scent of incense and age. You seek answers, the oracle murmured, not waiting for Darla to speak. I do, Darla replied, recounting the events since Bakaku's release. The oracle nodded. In freeing the Jinn, you upset a balance that had been maintained for centuries. Now, the spirits that once were bound have found their way back, drawn to the energy of the place where their captor was last seen. But how do I stop them? Darla asked, desperation evident in her voice. The oracle was silent for a moment. You must re-establish the balance. But be warned, it will come at a cost. She handed Darla a small crystal. This will protect you for now. But remember, the longer the spirits remain, the stronger they become. Darla left the tent, her mind heavy with the weight of her new knowledge. As she made her way back to Holmby Hills, the shadows seemed to lengthen, watching her every move. The battle was far from over, and she knew that the days ahead would test her in ways she could not yet fathom. Back at the mansion, as night fell, the haunting piano melodies resumed. But now, armed with the oracle's wisdom and the protective crystal, Darla was ready. She knew she had to confront these restless spirits, to face the darkness and restore the balance. In the echoing vastness of her home, the stage was set for a confrontation between one determined woman and the restless spirits of the past. The mansion, once a symbol of opulence and luxury, was now an arena where the battle for Darla's very soul would be waged. Chapter 6. Confronting the shadows, the ornate clock in the hall struck midnight, its haunting chimes echoing through the mansion. Darla sat in the library, surrounded by ancient tomes and manuscripts. In front of her was a circle made of salt, candles flickering at cardinal points. The crystal the oracle gave her lay at the center, emitting a soft, otherworldly glow. She had spent days researching, piecing together clues from myriad sources to conduct a ritual to communicate with the spirits that haunted her estate. While the oracle's crystal offered protection, it was not a permanent solution. The balance had to be restored. A deep breath steeled her nerves. Lighting the final candle, she began to recite an incantation, her voice a mere whisper that grew in intensity. As she spoke, the room grew colder, the shadows deepened, and the crystal pulsed with a brighter light. From the dark corners of the room, ethereal figures began to emerge. One by one, they floated towards the circle, their faces twisted in anguish. 7 spirits in total, each bearing an ancient grudge, each bound by Bakaku in ages past. I summon thee to parley, Darla intoned, her voice clear and authoritative. The spirits paused at the boundary of the circle, unable to cross the protective barrier. The most dominant of them, a tall figure in a regal robe, stepped forward. His voice, when he spoke, was like the rustling of old parchment. Why have you called us, mortal? Why do you disturb our newfound freedom? Darla swallowed hard. Your freedom has come at great cost. My home, my life, have been upended. The balance must be restored. The spirit's ethereal face twisted into a semblance of a smile. The Jinn trapped us, used our energies for his own gains. Now we are free, and we intend to stay that way. I mean you no harm, Darla replied. But the unrest, the disturbances, they cannot continue. Then release us from this place, another spirit hissed. Send us to the realm we belong. Darla hesitated. The research she had done indicated that these spirits, once bound to this earthly realm, could not simply be sent away. There had to be a way to appease them, to give them peace. Tell me what binds you here, she said, addressing the regal spirit again. How can I help you find peace? For a moment, the spirit looked surprised. Then, slowly, he began to recount his tale. He spoke of ancient betrayals, of kingdoms lost and love unfulfilled. As he spoke, the other spirits joined in, their voices melding into a haunting chorus of sorrow and longing. It became clear to Darla that these spirits, in life, were all interconnected. Their fates had been cruelly entwined by Bakaku, who had trapped them to draw on their collective energies. You are all bound by a common thread, she said once the spirits had finished their tales. Perhaps, in finding closure for one, you might all find peace. The regal spirit nodded. My beloved was taken from me. Her pendant, a token of our love, was stolen and hidden away by Bakaku. Find it, return it to this place, and perhaps we might find the peace that has eluded us for so long. Darla nodded, determination flaring within her. I will find it. I promise. With a final nod, the spirits began to fade, leaving the room in an eerie silence. The ritual was over, but Darla's quest had just begun. Over the next few days, Darla scoured the mansion, looking for any hint of the pendant. She searched hidden compartments, old chests, and even consulted with local historians, trying to trace Bakaku's steps. Late one night, as she was poring over an old map of the estate, she noticed a small marking, an emblem that resembled the pendant described by the regal spirit. It was located near a forgotten grove, a place shrouded in myths and old legends. With renewed vigor, Darla set out the next day, equipped with tools and determination. Hours of searching led her to a hidden alcove, overgrown with ivy and moss. And there, half buried beneath centuries of dirt and decay, she found it, a delicate pendant, its gemstone still shimmering with a soft light. Holding it close, she made her way back to the mansion. Night had fallen, and the familiar chills that had become commonplace greeted her. But tonight was different. Tonight, she had hope. Arriving at the library, she placed the pendant within the salt circle and began the ritual anew. The spirits emerged, their anticipation palpable. As Darla held up the pendant, a brilliant light enveloped the room, and one by one, the spirits began to fade, their voices lifting in a song of gratitude and release. The final spirit, the regal one, approached Darla, his form more solid than before. You have given us peace, he said, his voice full of emotion. For that, we are eternally grateful. With a nod and a smile, he too faded, leaving Darla alone in the room. The mansion was quiet, the oppressive atmosphere lifted. As dawn broke, a new day began, the estate bathed in the golden light of a new beginning. But as Darla would soon discover, every action has consequences. The balance had been restored, but at what cost? For in the world of spirits and ancient pacts, nothing is ever truly as it seems. Chapter 7. The price of silence. With the dawn breaking over the Holmby Hills, Darla felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. The mansion, so long a place of restless spirits and the malevolent pranks of Bakaku, now sat silent. Birds, long driven away by the disquiet of the supernatural, began to chirp, and a warm breeze danced through the open windows. Darla spent the day reconnecting with her home. She walked the grounds, rediscovering the beauty of her gardens without the foreboding presence of Bakaku. As she wandered, she felt an overwhelming gratitude to the oracle for giving her the tools and knowledge she needed. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, Darla decided to host a dinner party, wanting to share her reclaimed home with friends. It was time for laughter and joy to fill the hallways once more. The evening started perfectly. The grand dining hall echoed with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and soft music playing in the background. But as the night wore on, Darla began to notice subtle oddities. The lights flickered, and a cold draft seemed to drift through rooms that were otherwise warm. Around midnight, as her guests were leaving, one of them, Clarice, a longtime friend and sensitive to the supernatural, pulled Darla aside. "There's still something here," she whispered, her face pale. "Something's changed, but it hasn't left." Darla's heart sank. She had hoped that the ordeal was over, but deep down, she knew it was too good to be true. That night, as Darla tried to sleep, she heard it, the soft, insidious whisper that she had come to associate with Bakaku. It slithered from the shadows, a mocking reminder of the Jinn's lingering presence. "You thought you could get rid of me so easily?" The voice taunted. "You may have appeased those pitiful spirits, but you forget our binding pact. 5 wishes, Darla. 2 remain." Frustration bubbled within her. "I want this to end, Bakaku. Name your price." A dark laughter filled the room. "Oh, you'll know soon enough." The next morning, Darla woke up to find her world altered. The colors seemed dimmer, and a constant, muffled ringing filled her ears. Panic gripped her as she realized the horrifying truth: she had lost her hearing. Stumbling out of bed, she tried to call for help, but her voice seemed distant, as if she was underwater. She could feel the vibrations of her shouts, but the sounds eluded her. She was trapped in a silent world, with only Bakaku's dark laughter echoing in her mind. Desperate, she turned to the oracle once more, seeking a solution. Through written communication, she learned the terrible truth. The appeasement of the spirits had weakened Bakaku, but he had retaliated by taking something essential from Darla. "There is a way," the oracle wrote, her eyes filled with sympathy, "but it comes with great risk." Without hesitation, Darla indicated her willingness to do whatever it took. "You must confront Bakaku directly," the oracle began, "in the realm of the Jinn. Only there can you reclaim what's been taken from you. But beware, for time moves differently in that realm. And while you might find what you seek, you might also lose more than you can bear." Determined, Darla agreed to the perilous journey. With the oracle's guidance, she prepared, drawing symbols of protection on her skin and carrying with her the crystal that had once shielded her. As she stepped through the portal the oracle opened, Darla felt a cold rush of air, and then she was somewhere else, somewhere dark and foreboding, with swirling mists and distant, echoing screams. In this realm, her hearing was restored, and the sounds were overwhelming: cries of anguish, whispers of deceit, and Bakaku's voice, always just out of reach. For what felt like days, Darla wandered, following the thread of Bakaku's voice, confronting her fears and the darkest parts of her soul. Along the way, she met other lost souls, trapped in this realm, victims of their own desires and the Jinn's malevolence. Finally, she found him, Bakaku, hovering above a pit of swirling darkness. "You've come," he sneered. "Do you truly believe you can defeat me in my own realm?" With newfound strength and determination, Darla confronted the Jinn. They battled, not with weapons, but with wills. It was a test of endurance, wit, and strength of character. In the end, with the power of the crystal and her unwavering determination, Darla emerged victorious. Bakaku, weakened and defeated, had no choice but to return what he had taken. With her hearing restored, Darla made her way back to the portal and to her world. But as she stepped through, she realized the oracle's warning had been true. Time had moved differently in the Jinn's realm. The mansion was older, worn down by time and neglect. And while she had been gone for days in the Jinn's realm, years had passed in her world. Determined to rebuild her life and the legacy of her home, Darla set to work, her spirit unbroken. But in the shadows, Bakaku watched, waiting for the right moment to strike once more. For while he might have been defeated, he was far from gone. Chapter 8. Eclipse time. Darla stood at the entrance of her mansion, trying to make sense of the passage of time. The facade, once grand and polished, now bore the scars of neglect. Ivy crawled up the walls, windows were dust-covered and shattered, and the ornate front door hung loosely on rusted hinges. Even the grounds, which once flourished with vibrant flora, now stood as a shadowy, overgrown jungle. With trepidation, she stepped inside, each footfall echoed through the vast, desolate halls. Paintings of her ancestors, now faded and covered in cobwebs, hung crookedly on the walls. The air was heavy with the scent of mold and dampness. In the center of the grand entrance hall, atop a marble pedestal, sat a huge hourglass, its sands eerily still. Engraved on its base was a cryptic message: to reclaim lost time, pay the toll of the mind. She cautiously approached, reaching out to touch the cool glass. As her fingers made contact, a rush of memories flooded her senses: laughter, love, loss, and betrayal. Tears filled her eyes as she realized what had been taken from her, years of life and experiences, forever lost. Amidst the swirl of memories, the image of Bakaku loomed large, mocking her. "You may have won a battle, but the war is far from over," he hissed. Wiping her tears, Darla steadied herself. She wouldn't let Bakaku have the last laugh. He had taken her time, and she was determined to get it back. She decided to consult the oracle once more. The journey to her temple, once familiar, now seemed alien as the surroundings had aged alongside the mansion. The temple itself seemed ancient, its stones moss-covered and crumbling. Inside, the oracle sat, ageless as ever, her piercing gaze fixed on Darla. "You've returned from the abyss, but at a cost," she said, her voice soft yet filled with authority. "I need to reclaim my lost years," Darla implored. "I cannot let Bakaku's curse define my life." The oracle sighed. "Time, once lost, cannot easily be retrieved. But there might be a way, albeit dangerous." Darla nodded, desperation evident in her eyes. "Tell me." "There is a ritual, old as time itself, that might help. But it requires 3 things: a token of the past, a beacon of the present, and a glimpse of the future." Darla thought for a moment. The hourglass. Could it be the beacon of the present? The oracle nodded. Yes, it represents the now. But finding the other 2 won't be easy. The token of the past is an artifact or item deeply connected to a memory, while the glimpse of the future is a vision or prophecy yet to come. Determined, Darla set out on her quest. She first scoured the mansion, looking for a token of her past. After hours of searching, she came across a childhood diary, filled with dreams, hopes, and memories. It was perfect. For the glimpse of the future, she decided to visit Madame Leora, a reputed seer in Holmby Hills, known to possess the gift of foresight. Sitting across the table from Leora, amidst a room heavy with incense, Darla waited as the seer gazed into a crystal ball. Visions swirled within the depths of the orb. Darla, standing triumphant atop a hill, Bakaku defeated at her feet. But then another, darker vision. Darla, bound in chains, with Bakaku towering over, victorious. This future is not set in stone, Madame Leora whispered, her voice trembling. Your actions will determine the path. Equipped with the 3 items, Darla returned to the oracle to perform the ritual. At midnight, under a crescent moon, they began chanting ancient incantations. The hourglass started to spin, its sands flowing upwards, defying gravity. The diary and the crystal ball levitated, their energies intertwining. Suddenly, the atmosphere grew dense, and a shadowy figure emerged, Bakaku, furious at this attempt to undo his curse. As Darla and the oracle chanted louder, Bakaku lunged, trying to disrupt the ritual. The very fabric of time seemed to waver, the past, present, and future colliding. With a final, resounding chant, a blinding light enveloped the scene. When it cleared, the mansion was restored to its former glory, and Bakaku was nowhere in sight. However, the battle had taken its toll. While the mansion and its surroundings were rejuvenated, Darla found herself older, her hair streaked with gray. The years she had lost were returned to the world, but not to her. Yet, she was not disheartened. She had defeated Bakaku and restored balance. The cost was personal, but Darla realized that sometimes sacrifices had to be made for the greater good. As dawn broke, the mansion came alive with the sounds of birds chirping, signaling a new beginning. And while Bakaku's threat still loomed in the shadows, Darla was ready. For she now knew that time, while precious, was not the only measure of a life well lived. Chapter 9. Secrets beneath the days following the confrontation with Bakaku were eerily calm. The once dilapidated mansion was alive again with sunlight streaming through clear windows, and the gardens outside were blooming, their sweet fragrances wafting through the house. Birds sang and squirrels scampered, creating a facade of peace. But Darla knew better than to let her guard down. Every night, she would roam the halls, ensuring that each nook and corner of the mansion was secured. Yet, each morning, she'd find subtle changes. A vase shifted a few inches to the left, a painting hung upside down, or the persistent feeling of being watched. These little disruptions served as constant reminders that Bakaku's essence, while weakened, still lingered. The situation worsened when Darla began hearing whispers, hushed conversations, the words of which she could never quite catch. They seemed to originate from beneath the house. One particular evening, as she sipped tea in her parlor, she heard the distinct sound of footsteps in the mansion's underbelly. She set down her cup, her heart pounding. Gathering courage, she decided to investigate. Darla ventured into the basement, her lantern casting eerie shadows on the old wooden panels and stone walls. It was there that she stumbled upon a sealed door, one she had never noticed before. Oddly enough, this door was not old and weathered like the others but appeared newer, its wood polished and the handle gleaming. Hesitating briefly, she slowly turned the handle and pushed the door open. It led to a staircase that descended further beneath the mansion, into unknown depths. Taking a deep breath, she began her descent. The staircase seemed to go on forever, winding and turning, always moving downward. The air grew colder and damper, with each step she took. Eventually, the stairs led to a vast underground chamber, its boundaries disappearing into darkness. In the center stood an enormous obsidian altar, and around it, countless shadows flickered, remnants of souls long lost. It was then she realized that Bakaku had not just been trapped in the Vial. Over the centuries, this subterranean chamber had served as his lair, a place where he drew strength from the lost souls ensnared within its confines. The whispers grew louder, forming an unintelligible chorus. As she approached the altar, she noticed a series of engravings, symbols and incantations, some of which she recognized from her previous encounters with the Jinn. Above the altar, suspended in the air, was a shimmering portal, a tear in the fabric of reality. From it emanated an overpowering energy, neither wholly good nor entirely evil. Remembering the oracle's words about the power of the present, Darla cautiously approached the portal. She held out the hourglass, watching as the sands began to swirl. The whispers grew frantic, their urgency palpable. In a bold move, Darla thrust the hourglass into the portal. There was a blinding flash of light, and a shockwave sent her hurtling backward. The portal began to shrink, the tear in reality sealing itself. However, this act was not without its consequences. The obsidian altar cracked, and from its depths emerged Bakaku, his form more terrifying than ever. He towered over Darla, his eyes glowing like burning coals, and his voice echoing with millennia of pent-up fury. "You think you can defeat me? I am eternal," he roared. Darla, though terrified, stood her ground. "Your reign ends now, Bakaku. This is my home, my legacy. I won't let you take it from me." A fierce battle ensued. Bakaku, drawing power from the lost souls, unleashed bolts of dark energy, while Darla, channeling her willpower and determination, deflected them. The chamber echoed with their cries. The very foundations of the mansion threatened to crumble. In a moment of inspiration, Darla remembered the glimpse of the future Madame Leora had shown her, the vision of her standing triumphant. Harnessing that energy, she focused on Bakaku, forcing him back towards the now sealed portal. With one final push, Darla managed to imprison Bakaku once again, this time binding him to the remnants of the obsidian altar. Exhausted, she ascended the seemingly endless staircase, emerging back into the mansion's basement. She sealed the entrance to the underground chamber, vowing to never let anyone else stumble upon Bakaku's lair. Days turned to weeks, and the mansion finally began to feel like a home again. The disturbances ceased, and Darla could finally rest. Yet, she knew that the fight was not truly over. Bakaku, though imprisoned, was not defeated. He would return, and she would be ready. That night, as she drifted to sleep, Darla dreamt of the oracle. "Remember, Darla," she whispered, "every end is a new beginning." And as dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight, Chapter 10, ties that bind the sun, had barely risen, casting soft, golden hues over the majestic mansion and its sprawling gardens. The serenity outside was in stark contrast to the turmoil that raged within Darla. The encounter with Bakaku in the underground chamber had left her physically exhausted, but more than that, it had drained her mentally and emotionally. She began her morning ritual, slowly pacing the grand corridors of her home, ensuring that everything was in order. Yet, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake off the feeling that the eyes of the mansion were watching her, that whispers filled the air. As she made her way through the mansion, she found herself inexplicably drawn to the grand ballroom. The once opulent space had been transformed overnight. The grand chandeliers were shrouded in cobwebs, and a thick layer of dust covered the floor. But what caught her eye was a gigantic portrait that hung on the far wall, one she had never seen before. It was a painting of a woman, strikingly similar to Darla, with long raven black hair, piercing blue eyes, and an enigmatic smile. The attire, however, was from a different era, possibly centuries ago. Beneath the portrait, a golden plaque read, "Lady Delphine, Mistress of Holmby Hills." A shiver ran down Darla's spine as she recalled the tales passed down through her family. Lady Delphine was an ancestor, a powerful witch who had once resided in the mansion. Legend had it that she had bound a malevolent entity to protect her home and family, but in doing so, she had paid a terrible price. Was it possible? Had Lady Delphine bound Bakaku all those centuries ago? Lost in thought, Darla was jolted back to reality when a cold draft swept through the room. The candles lining the walls flickered and went out one by one, and the ballroom was plunged into darkness. From the shadows emerged a figure, Lady Delphine herself. She looked exactly like the portrait, but her eyes, though identical in color to Darla's, were filled with an age-old sorrow. "My child," she began, her voice echoing in the vast room. "You've awakened him." Darla took a step back, her heart racing. "Who are you? What do you want?" The apparition of Lady Delphine moved closer, her form shimmering in the dim light. "I am you, and you are me. We are bound by blood and by fate. The entity you know as Bakaku was bound by me to protect our home, but he grew too powerful, too malevolent. I had to imprison him, but in doing so, I sacrificed myself." Tears streamed down Darla's face as realization dawned. "Why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you tell me of the danger that lurked below?" Lady Delphine sighed, a melancholic sound that filled the room. "I tried, my dear. But the bonds of time are strong. I could only watch and hope that you would find your way." Darla clenched her fists. "What do I do now? How do I rid this place of Bakaku once and for all?" The specter of Lady Delphine looked at her intently. "You have the power, Darla. You are the last in our line, the culmination of centuries of magic and strength. But remember, every binding has a key. To imprison Bakaku forever, you must find that key." "And where is it?" Darla asked desperately. "In the past," Lady Delphine whispered, her form beginning to fade. "Seek the oracle. She will guide you." Before Darla could ask anything more, Lady Delphine disappeared, leaving her alone in the darkened ballroom. The weight of her ancestry and the task ahead weighed heavily on her shoulders. But she was resolute. She would seek the oracle, find the key, and rid her home of Bakaku once and for all. Gathering her cloak, Darla made her way to the front of the mansion. She would head to Madame Leora, hoping the mystic would have answers. As she stepped out into the morning sun, a black raven perched on the gatepost caught her eye. It cawed loudly, ruffling its feathers, and flew off in the direction of the town. Taking it as an omen, Darla followed. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with peril and danger. But she was determined to reclaim her home, her legacy, and her destiny. The ties that bound her to Bakaku, to Lady Delphine, and to her own past were about to be tested. And as she walked, the mansion loomed behind her, silent, watchful, waiting. The battle had only just begun. We hope you have enjoyed our storytelling offering tonight. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to be alerted of future weekly additions to our collections. Paranormal Untold Stories.